Science fiction is one of the most flexible genres in existence. There are so many creative ideas and messages that can be conveyed through science fiction, whether the story is about a future dystopia or in outer space. However, despite all these creative opportunities, there are many science fiction stories that don't actually try to say anything meaningful about their own subject matter. Instead, they opt for the easy route, rehashing old ideas and conforming to popular opinions. This is a problem that is also carried over into anime, unfortunately. Most science fiction stories in this medium feature mechs, rip off other ideas, or decide to use the concepts for the sake of comedy. While these don't automatically make a show bad, examples are Patama Inverted and Waiting in the Summer, I can't help but feel sad that the uniqueness of the genre has been lost somewhere. Sure, we've got brilliance like Ergo Proxy, Paprika, and Steins Gate, but there are diamonds in the rough. This takes us to the topic of its review, Shin Sekai Yori. This was a show that received massive praise from the community for being the most original science fiction story in years. Or at least from the small minority that actually watched it. So I decided to give it a shot. Is Shin Sekai Yori as groundbreaking as I was led to believe, or was it a failure? Sit back, relax, and watch on as I review Shin Sekai Yori. Shin Sekai Yori takes place in a version of Japan around 1,000 years in the future. Over time, humans have evolved and now contain power, which is a form of telekinesis. The people living there live peacefully in their utopian society. Sorry, I must have a cough there. Using humanoid rats known as monster rats to do their labor for them. The show stars 5 children: Saki, Satoru, Shun, Mamoru, and Maria. We follow them as they grow up, discovering more and more about their seemingly perfect society and learning more about themselves in the process. Yes, this section was left incredibly vague, and yes, this was intentional. I went into the show pretty much blind, and that's how I believe you should watch it too. The setup is quite unique, combining the supernatural with science fiction in such a distinctive way. Granted, it doesn't sound like a huge epic story, but that's not the point of Shin Sekai. The anime instead opts for a more subtle narrative. Maybe a little too subtle in some areas. I think I've stated numerous times previously that I prefer a character-driven narrative over a story-driven narrative. My reasoning behind this is because if you don't care about the characters, then why should you care about the story they're going through? Unfortunately, the characters of Shin Sekai are kind of lackluster, though there are a few exceptions. Firstly, there's Saki, the main character of the entire story. She's one of the better characters of a story and does go through some very good character development, but her characterization, at least initially, is weak. She's kind, naive, and selfless, but her mental state is incredibly stable. That's kind of it, though her character development, as stated earlier, is excellent. Her naivete fades over time, and she becomes more aware of her surroundings and the consequences of her actions. Not to mention how perfectly her development is tied into the story, which is absolutely astounding. This makes her gradually more likable as the show progressed, but still doesn't excuse her somewhat bland personality. Next, there's Satoru, who's my favorite out of the 5 main characters. Not to spoil the progression of a story, but seeing how he changes as he grows older is very interesting to watch. He starts off as a carefree joker, then gradually evolves into someone who takes his morals and companions seriously as he becomes an adult. Next, there's Shun. I feel like he was one of the weaker characters, but that's due to his role in the story, which I won't spoil, but I will say that his development does tie into the story, so it's somewhat excusable. Then there's Mamoru and Maria. Mamoru is very weak-minded and shy, while Maria is outgoing, kind, jocular, and considerate. While again, they do tie into the story wonderfully, it was hard for me to truly care about them because their characterization was somewhat lackluster. They were still likable enough, but I wouldn't call them favorites of mine. The other characters are fine, but there's one standout that I can't talk about because spoilers. Let's just say that in the latter third especially, he is a very interesting and multi-dimensional villain that I actually ended up sympathizing with, which is something a villain hasn't been able to make me do in quite some time. Overall, while there are no characters I would consider worthless, it was hard for me to make a connection with the majority of them, which is a huge flaw for me. From the way I criticize the characters, you'd think that I hated this anime. Well, let me change that mindset because I finally get to praise this show. Shin Sekai's story is absolutely phenomenal and needs to be recognized as one of the best of the medium. The world building and lore is fantastic, creating an intriguing and fleshed out setting that always had me wondering what the show will do with it next. The pacing is slightly problematic, but in all honesty it never bothered me too much. However, the best part of the story is its structure and how it foreshadows everything using excellent subtlety. I love how the decisions the characters make in this show don't always face repercussions until later on in the story, and the usage of time skips is very tasteful, unlike some other shows. The foreshadowing is unparalleled, and unfortunately I can't explain why because of obvious spoilers. Then there are the themes. Oh, how I love the themes! The story has the typical, like the values of friendship and family, but then it has the atypical, like stereotyping, racism, narrow-mindedness, and how important it is to be a nonconformist. It reminds me of The Giver in a sense, because the characters are brought to believe that their society is perfect when it is anything but. Finally, there's the ending. The ending is perfect. It's very beautiful, satisfying, and wraps up all loose ends, and made me come close to crying. That is a feat. We have to go back to criticism, don't we? Produced by A1 Pictures, the animation is, and believe me, I hate saying this, rather poor. Especially since this is coming from a studio that is practically known for its animation. I may not like Sword Art Online, but something I can't deny is that it was animated pretty well. On to the actual animation, the lack of shadowing on the characters made them look rather flat, and the lack of coloring on the character designs made everything look rather dull. The motions are somewhat clunky, but do look nice when needed. The character designs are pretty unique. But again, they look really flat without various colors and shadows. The backgrounds look decent with some nice detail and atmosphere, but it's nothing to write home about. The lighting does look really good at some points, and the usage of silhouettes and contrast in color did astound me at points, when it's not overdone. In episodes 5 and 10, a guest director handled the project, and those episodes have some of the worst animation I've ever seen, period. The textures were weird, the character designs were changed, and the cinematography was terrible. Everything was unnecessarily zoomed up on, to the point where you can't even tell what's happening. Anyway, let's move on to sound. The OST is quite good. I love how it manages to make everything sound so ethereal and ominous, using a variety of instruments and creepy child choirs. My favorite song is the ending. Well, the first one anyway. The song is so catchy and calming, and the animation is beautiful. Second ending is fine and worth a listen. And there is no opening, so nothing to say there. Finally, should you watch it in Japanese or English? I watched it in Japanese because I don't particularly like Sentai dubs, so I can safely say that the Japanese dub is very solid. I have to give props to Yuki Kaji, who played Satoru, Risa Taneda, who played Saki, and Daisuke Namikawa, who played Squealer, for their wonderful performances as their respective characters. If you want to watch it in English, go ahead, but it wasn't for me. I'm going to say something that you probably won't expect, considering how harsh this review was at points. I love this anime. Yes, it has major flaws in nearly every category except in its story, but I still love it to pieces, and it's for reasons I can't quite explain. Normally I can't get myself to like stories that don't have fantastic characters, but rules are made to be broken, I guess. Maybe it's because every time it gets something right, it nails it right on the head. Besides, you know that you truly love a show when you readily admit to its flaws, but still love the show nonetheless. At least that's what I believe anyway. I give Shin Sekai Yori a 7.5 out of 10, and a recommendation to check it out. It may be flawed, but it's worth watching despite that. But, like always, it's up to you to decide your own opinions. Anyway, I hoped you enjoyed that review. This is going to be the first in probably a lot of backlog reviews, since I'm not going to have the most time to write new scripts. But that doesn't mean I'm fresh out of other content either. I'll see you all in my next video.